Welcome, everyone. My name is Joey Reese, and I run the Practice Center. And through the Practice Center, in partnership with Department of Human Services, I am here to talk to you about the forgiveness process. And today, very specifically, we're talking about writing the forgiveness story and its connection to happiness, or how we might write happiness, that formula, into the forgiveness story that we might want to carry around and tell ourselves from now on. So as always, we want to land here in this space and time intentionally. So notice how your day is going. It's noon. So how's your morning been? How have you been feeling? What have you been feeling? What have you been thinking? What kind of work do you have to put aside? Are you multitasking? And could you just for a moment put that down and just really take an accounting of how you are arriving? So how does your body feel? What's the temperature in your space like? What noises do you hear? What can you smell? Are you eating lunch? What do you taste? And then finally, what is your relationship to your breath been like today? Maybe that will prompt you to take a deep breath, a breath that allows your stomach to fill, your shoulders to relax, your jaws to unclench, and then exhale in a way that allows all of that air to be released and your belly to relax and deflate. Welcome. We've been chatting for a while now about the forgiveness process, and hopefully you've attended several others with myself and Fred Luskin with his Forgive for Good process. So you have some solid language around what forgiveness is and isn't, and that there are many steps and components that we can utilize to let go of stories that no longer serve us. So when we're talking about writing the forgiveness story, it is just that. The things that tend to cause us pain in life are these stories that we tell ourselves, because a lot of these things happened way in the past. The stories about how my mom failed me as a mom, that's from decades ago. I was just telling Susan that our very last session in March for these is on my birthday, my 52nd birthday. So as we're entering our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and we're still blaming our mothers, our fathers, our siblings for what's going wrong in our life, like when I say it out loud, of course it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me when I say it out loud, and yet it pains me. And yet I know that there are these things that I default to. So anytime there's some sort of thing that shows up in my life where I feel disconnected or unsafe, I can hear myself blaming my mom. I mean, it's quieter now, but I can feel myself going, God, if she just taught me that, or if I just knew this, if I had this kind of support, then that's the story. That's a story that I'm telling myself. That's a grievance story. The grievance story that has many components, right? It's usually about me taking my life really seriously and how it's just all about me. Definitely blaming somebody, right? And then I'm attributing that terrible feeling that I have inside that has me constricted, right? Maybe I don't have room for anything else. I don't have room to look for joy and peace and all that, because all I can do is just hold on to the story of how somebody wronged me. So these stories, we can undo in our minds. We can undo them in the way that we live. Now, it's not about a snap of the finger, but it is really processing. What are you thinking about that story? When you think about it, how do you feel? Do you know where you feel it? Do you have any kind of awareness around that? And then what are you doing or not doing? So those three things are really important. What are you doing? Sometimes we avoid. When I feel that feeling, I try to shove it aside. I pretend like nothing is wrong. I pretend like I'm strong and I'm living. So sometimes the doing is about hiding. Sometimes the doing is about denying. So it's important to go, what do I think about that story? Every time I think about my mom, how do I feel it? And then what do I do with it? Do I allow myself to process and grieve? or do I shove it away somewhere in that corner? So in then telling ourselves a new story, it's not just about creating it up here, but it's how do we then have a felt sense of this forgiveness story? What are the components that might be helpful for me to actually live out my forgiveness story? What are the components? So today, that's what we're going to be covering. And I'm going to give you some worksheets and some step-by-steps and kind of a justification of why those might work. Here's one more big arching kind of sweeping offer. There's a lot of things that don't work. There's a lot of things that won't work for you in particular. I think around this healing and wellness space, there's a lot that can be pseudoscience-y. There can be a lot that feels woo-hoo-y. I would really invite you to spend less time on what's not working. If it's not working and you've determined that, let it go. And spend more time being curious about the things that might be working or that feel a little bit better. So if any of the components and the pieces that I'm talking about today, you really feel like there's this resistance that rises. So resistance, we can tell because there's maybe a shortening of breath and a felt sense of constriction. Then that's okay. Let that go. And then lean into something that might feel like, I could consider that. So that would be my invitation to you. So all of this work, mindfulness work, forgiveness work, it's unconditional. Unconditional. So that means that we're not interested in how we can get somebody else to change or how we can change our external circumstances. True change is about how we look at our lives and what we do with it on the inside, what we think, how we feel, what we're doing or not doing. And if we do not get those things in alignment, then no matter like how many degrees we have, how much money we've got going on, what house we're living in, we really won't have access to that peace of mind if we don't figure out how we can get those three in alignment. So when we're talking about happiness, I think it's easy to go to if I had a little bit more money, and I'm not saying the basic needs. I think we absolutely need that basic needs met, but 10% more money, 10% bigger house, those things don't tend to lead to happiness. So how are you thinking about happiness? What do you think about what it would take for you to really feel this internal sense of peace? Because your definition matters. And specifically in this process of forgiving for good, mindful forgiveness, letting things go, these are the steps that we've talked about this year so far. We've talked about the importance of being heard, right? Telling our grievance story. This is a piece that often gets skipped in helpers or people who really are denying their own pain because there's pain that's so much greater out there. There are people really suffering much more than me. So those of us who tend to do that will skip over this desire to be heard. So if that's you, then me telling you to rewrite your story won't feel meaty because it'll just be words. It'll be just like all the other goal settings we've done, all the other like good intentions that we've set for ourselves to live a better life. If we skip these first steps, then it'll just be empty words on a page. So I think this step today, what we're talking about, is really important, but it'll feel empty if you haven't been heard yet. If you haven't leaned into grief and grieving, if we haven't had access to our personal sense of power, and sometimes that can come out as revenge fantasies in our minds. If we haven't learned what expansion feels like, if we're walking around tight all the time, you know, that fake smile, that toxic positivity, then no matter what pretty words we write on a page about living a different kind of life won't be real. So this happens in an expanded state, a relaxed state, a reduced state of stress, where we can hold all kinds of paradoxes. Life is beautiful and it sucks. Yeah, I love this person and they drive me crazy. It's a lot of ands, and those ands only fit in an expanded state, not in our constriction. And then we got to be really willing to look at what kinds of rules or values have we carried on trying to should that on others and on myself. Where did that come from? And can I dismantle these? And then doing the work of self-forgiveness. At what point did this grievance story that had a clear villain get conflated and mixed up and messed up with like me doing damage to myself? Because when we've lived a long life, it's not just like one clean thread. It's a ball. Yeah, so to do the work of self-forgiveness is important. And then we put it all together and tell pieces of these stories and rewrite it into a forgiveness story. Before we go here, I want to break down then what happiness is. Because if we're telling ourselves a really shallow, toxic positivity story, like just always look on the bright side of life, right? How do you really do that if it's that shallow stuff? And if it hasn't penetrated into our hearts, to how we feel, then that background story we've been telling ourselves, that's going to be prevalent, because we are the stories that we tell ourselves. And we are also the stories that we really feel. We are the stories that we feel in our body. So undoing that might take time, will take energy and time, and then energy and more time and more energy. So whatever definition of forgiveness you're bringing into this space, I would like to clarify that what I am talking about is this forgiveness that is absolutely a choice that you make to let go of a story that doesn't serve you well anymore today, because you know that you deserve that space within you for peace and joy and happiness, or whatever else that you would like to see in your life that you might not be seeing because it's consumed by these stories of how other people have been doing us wrong. So forgiveness is about choosing to create more space to let go of these stories so that you can live the life that you want. That's the forgiveness that I'm talking about. And then if I'm tying that to happiness, we'll see some of these words repeated again and again, because these are all really tied. That the idea of creating more space so that you can listen and see what's going on for you, and then make some choices around that. Always start with intention. Like, what do you want out of your life? Have you really asked yourself that? It's surprising to me that I can ask adults who have lived a really good support, like they've been able to pay their bills and take care of their kids and do all the things. If I ask, what makes you happy? What do you like doing? There's a lot of us that can't answer that. There's a lot of us. And sometimes I get, well, what do you mean? I take care of other people. But what do you like to do? So if I ask you, like, what kind of happiness do you want? What's your intention around that? Have you ever considered that question? I want to break this down a little bit and then come back to our forgiveness story. So this idea of intention. Oh boy, this I think gets really mixed up a lot, because what's the famous quote we hear about intention? That the road to hell is paved with it. Road to hell is paved with positive intentions or good intentions, we say. And so intention, it's like, oh, the intention to fit in a society that I don't fit in. I mean, that could probably have some detrimental impacts. The intention to live my life based on somebody else's roadmap of life, that probably won't lead me to happiness. So this is about, what is your heart's desire around intention and what you would like to see in your life. So setting that intention has to be about the essence of who you are, and not about somebody else's idea of intention. I mean, think about the whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses. Like, who does that make happy? Keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah, that means I see my neighbor get a bigger car. I feel somehow inadequate and I need to get a bigger car. So my intention is to keep up with them, but does that really create happiness for you? So the intention, it's specific to happiness. When you think about that word, what do you want? What is your intention around happiness? And then what do you pay attention to? Actually, let me ask you a different question. How good are you at paying attention? Let's do a little test here. I'm going to set up a timer for 60 seconds on the screen for you. In that time, I would just like for you to count your breath. So follow your inhale all the way to the conclusion and your exhale all the way to the conclusion. So count, please, how many breaths you can take in these 60 seconds. Okay. So here's the screen. Ready, go. How did you do? 2 questions. How many breaths did you take in that 60 seconds? If you can put it in the chat, please do so. Second question. How many of you guys were able to follow your inhales and exhales all the way through for all of the breaths? How many of you guys were distracted by, oh, that's changing colors, or your to-do list, or the phone ringing, or the bazillions of other thoughts that you might have had in that 60 seconds? Yeah, I see some hands raising. So here's what I need to say about emergency breathing. That 60 seconds can be magical. And it's actually a homework assignment I'm going to send you guys all off with. Our system, that fight, flight, or freeze system, can go offline, and your parasympathetic nervous system that is there to support and guide, that allows your food to digest, for you to think about things like love and stuff like that. It's on an on-off switch. So they both can't be on. Your sympathetic nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, they both can't be on at the same time. So in the 60 seconds, that's all that it takes for us, about 60 seconds, about 60 to 90 seconds maybe. But that's all it takes for us to shut down that fight, flight, or freeze and become more relaxed. And that's 60 seconds. But it has to be about intentionally placing our focus and our attention on that breath. So if anything, in that minute, if you were distracted, number one, you're in good company. You're in good company. And number two, it's something that you can work up to. Number three, our goal is to get up to about 20 minutes of sitting and observing our breath. If you had thoughts coming in, some of you guys raised your hand going, yeah, I was distracted by that. That is not an issue or a problem to be solved. It's something to be noticed and embraced. So while I'm breathing and all of a sudden I'm like, uh-oh, I hear a car coming. I hope they don't come knock at my door. It's to then not wrestle with that. Oh, Joey, you forgot to start counting. And oh my God, see, this is why you suck at it. That's chasing it down the rabbit hole. If we can just observe that thought coming in and let it go, and come back to our breath. That is the foundation for mindful meditation. So that ability to pay attention just to your breath is what I'm talking about when we talk about pay attention. So how can we pay attention to the things that make us happy? How can we pay attention to this big concept of forgiveness if we know that we're so distracted that we can't even pay our full attention for 1 minute of breathing? Yeah. So your ability to pay attention is not one-to-one. I mean, there are things that you enjoy more so you can kind of get into the flow state and focus. But that general ability to pay attention is something that you can cultivate. We cultivate our ability to be mindful, to pay attention to this present moment. So that 60-second activity, I would offer it to you as like a monthly emergency practice. So do that with your children, do that in your classroom, do that with your team, do that with your staff. That 1 minute, hey, how are we doing with this breath? Can we count? So also 5 to 6 breath is ultimately the breathing pace that'll allow that parasympathetic nervous system to turn on. So those of you who had 10, 15, 20 breaths, that's okay. You just established your baseline. Our goal is to watch it and engage in breath that maybe you can fill up your lungs a little bit more. Maybe there'll be different spaces that you can eventually fill up, but that ability to create that space within you and pay attention to that breath that's about 5 to 6 in 1 minute. That is what switches your sympathetic nervous system to your parasympathetic nervous system. So if you get triggered and if you're like, oh, when that person says that thing, that's sort of what I'm talking about. That's your fight, flight, that's your freeze mechanism. If you can go, hold on a minute, I'm going to go put myself on a timeout. If we didn't talk about anything else, that in itself will be gold for us. That will create that space where you can be more responsive versus reactive. So maybe note, how reactionary are you in your life? That question is, how much are you being led by your grievance story? How quickly are you reacting? And do you want more control? Well, this is one way to start gaining control. Have the intention to create more space so you can be responsive, and then practice paying attention to yourself. Those two things matter. So when we're paying attention to this breath that goes in and out, sometimes we can notice the emotion that is predominant. Sometimes I can go, God, I'm such an angry person. That's what I mean by that emotion becoming me. I'm such an angry person. Oh, I'm such a depressed person. We identify ourselves with that emotion. So in paying attention to that kind of internal landscapes, we can start to recognize that our feelings and the things that we feel are not us. Yeah. For that moment, I'm angry, but I'm also a lot of other things. Usually I'm also sad. Usually I'm also trying to keep up a certain kind of image because that's important to me and I don't want to lose face in that space. So there's a lot of complexity in our emotions. So widening our emotional language, our vocabulary, that can happen when we create that space and pay attention to what's happening within us. So as I breathe, the more I practice that, the more I can say, ooh, I am angry and sad and excited. And there's some happiness in there. Yeah, we have the capacity to hold a lot. The question is, do you know, are you aware? So emergency breathing, maybe you can take a screenshot, maybe you can create your own, maybe you can put that on your calendar once a month, but to practice that emergency breathing, which is 60 minutes, and our goal is 5 to 6 breaths. So I encourage you to implement that if you do not already have a mindfulness practice. If you do, great, because that's what I would talk you into eventually. So establishing a practice might look like this. Your goal is when you're sitting there and we start thinking catastrophic thoughts about what's happened to us in our past or what's happening across the globe. When we find that space, start breathing. Then we can focus on this present moment, what's personal to me, and what's local right here. And all of those might deserve defining. Yeah, because what's present, personal, and local to me will be different for you. Your local, present, personal might be a little bit bigger than mine. And then we want to eventually work up to 20 minutes of really intentionally sitting so that we can hear what we're thinking and then let them go, so that we're not at the mercy of reacting to them. Eventually, if it feels good to you, you want to implement some sort of consistent gratitude or loving kindness practice. Now, these are all like good ideas and I would be spouting them out, but these are research-based. So if you are interested, Forgiveness and Health, written by one of our friends, Lauren Toussaint from the University of Iowa, really important information, important research-based findings on what letting go will do for us in our bodies, what gratitude will allow. I mean, there's lots of other research around gratitude, right? That's really highly researched topic, but gratitude and loving kindness, that can also create more space. And then learning to be with our emotions, knowing that we are not our emotions. So no matter what comes up. So a lot of times what comes up for me is that I'm just petty, judgmental, and angry. So my job is to sit with that with as much kindness as I can muster for myself, going, yeah, petty. Yep, I'm judgmental today. Yeah, so it's not to beat myself up over it. So establishing a practice is really important, because the first components of choice making, happiness, forgiveness, it's really about the intention and our ability to pay attention. Those are really paramount. Then we can move on to the next steps, which is, what is your connection currently to yourself? How well do you know yourself? And then how well do you know the people around you? What is your connection like to the people around you? What is your connection to the people who have opposing views as you? What does your connection look like? Your connection to people and purpose is the second component to happiness. Happiness is not this just thing that we arrive at one day. Like, our attention to be happy and paying attention to the things that make us happy is important. And then the quality of our connections to our people and our purpose is important. And purpose can be a little bit tricky, because what if you were never allowed to lean into your purpose because it got swapped out for job or service that doesn't really fulfill you? We might need to do some excavating around that, because your connection to your purpose, the thing that makes you go, oh, this gives me life. This gives me life. Your connection to leaning into that is important, says the research around happiness. Your connection to the quality of your relationship to your people matters. And I will dive a little bit more into that. This is how I like to look at myself. I know that in this current moment, I am Joey that was created as a loving being. That's my true belief, that I have love in there. For a long time, I identified myself with my trauma story. I'm an adopted person living in the US that is filled with racism, and I'm not even living with my family of origin. I'm pointing out to you all the events that happened that separated me from a felt sense of dignity, safety, or belonging. I would say that's me. I am my stories. And then pretty soon I started like putting my own spin around that, why that story was so harmful to me and why I'm a mess today. That suffering, my ability to suffer, and then all of the mechanisms that I placed so that I can survive. I am all of these things. When we get into this healing and healthy and restoring ourselves to wholeness space, I think so many of us forget the rest of what makes me me, because I'm judging those. I'm trying to get away from that. And I just want to focus on like this loving piece, but that's not reality. The reality is I am all of these things. I'm a hot mess a lot of times. Yeah, the way that I've survived like that for a long time, and it's been super helpful to me. I don't want to get rid of those. So it's all of me that's trying to connect with others around their own suffering and around who they are, right? When we try to reduce everybody down to sainthood, I think that does more damage. So first and foremost, the connection to me And the quality of that will determine how well I'm able to connect with others. If I pretend like I'm not this echoes of my trauma, if I pretend like I don't have suffering stories right now, and if I pretend that I'm over my trauma and I'm all better now, that lie will prevent me from authentically connecting with another person, because we can sniff that out in each other. All right, we can sniff out toxic positivity in a second. I mean, you know people who think that they know themselves and you're like, ooh, they don't know themselves. You know that in others, right? Well, that's true for us too. So this connection piece, it's about authenticity. It's about really, are you able to embrace all of who you are in this moment? Not some weird future place when we're going to all be perfect, right? The fantasy self, but right now, right now. So this connection with your people and purpose is going to be from this whole sense of who you are. And I think that's, I don't want to treat that lightly. So this part of me that is strong and independent and loud and judgmental, that is me. And my job is to not be reactionary or extra judgmental or chase that down a rabbit hole and shame myself, is to go, okay, how do I embrace all of that? And then that might allow me to give others around me a little bit more grace in their messiness. So this connection to people and purpose first starts with you, and a really good excavating of who you are. I love this quote: to become authentic, we require a thirst for freedom. And I say, freedom from what? Well, freedom from the shackles of trying to be perfect when I know that I'm carrying around stories of trauma and pain. And then the years that I've coped with this and survived, like, that's not something I should be ashamed of, but sometimes I feel like shackled by that. Yeah, trying to pretend like I don't have these coping mechanisms, trying to pretend like I figured it all out. So my fight for freedom means that I can embrace that and not be at the mercy of those stories. So what kind of thirst for freedom do you have? Or do you even see it in this light? So when I start asking myself those and have to really show up like that, it can make me feel vulnerable. And then it's like, oh God, then who will really listen to me or like me, or, you know, all of those things. And we like maybe try to shove that aside and go, you know, when we're at work, we're just going to deal with work. But all of Brene Brown's work will say, hey, we are all of who we are. And then that person shows up to work, and that person shows up in a relationship. That person shows up to parenting. We don't get to just pick and choose pieces. Yeah, we are who we are. So this work of vulnerability, opening up, like fighting for freedom together is a worthy cause, because that is the foundation. Then that can lead to bottom lines and better, like effective working teams and all that. But that willingness to look at all the ugly and the good is important in this connection to people and purpose. When we pretend like I like everybody and yes, this job is giving me meaning, and it's not, it doesn't really penetrate within you, then we get this false sense of happiness. We get this false sense of positivity. So only you can really determine that for yourself. Like, where are you with this? Only you can determine that. So I throw around this word connection quite often. And it's like, what does it really mean to connect? So I want to quick throw this in there. Connection means that we're in acceptance of myself and you. Means I have some, and acceptance, like acceptance across the board. Not only acceptance of people who are doing the work, not just acceptance of people who aren't judging, not acceptance of only people who are accepting, not acceptance of like acceptance. If you are the person that has the intention to connect, that means you are sitting in acceptance of people who are not doing this work, who are super judgmental, who are showing up, you know, like fired up and not responding and reacting instead. If your intention is to connect, then how do you accept or sit in acceptance of folks who are sitting in judgment, guilt, criticism, comparison, fear, blame, advice, and expectation. Yeah, this is not conditional. That's where I'm going. This is not conditional. So connection really means acceptance, empathy, your ability to take responsibility for your own emotions. So this list is what I mean when I say connection. So it's not just connection, it's deeply rooted. And if all of that didn't make any sense, if you're like, oh God, that's all good ideas, but that's a lot. That's a lot of caveats and a lot of definitions within definitions, then maybe we can start right here. Savoring the moment. What does it mean to savor this moment? And the quickest way that we can get there is if I ask you to think of a lemon. Oh, think of it like you're scratching the skin of it. And then you slice it maybe and you see it squirt up. As you cut open that lemon. Smell that lemon. Can you recall the taste of that lemon? So even without a lemon in your hand, you can start to have bodily reactions around that lemon. Yes. So that really involves you being in this moment, going, oh gosh, look at that mind-body connection. Same thing can happen when you're looking at a tree. When sometimes I look at huge trees, I have a koa tree that's right outside my window. It's massive. And gosh, I can't even, how many birds are housed there? It's unbelievable to me. It sounds like there's thousands of birds that live in there. But anyway, so when I look at that tree, I can go, like I can savor the sight, the smell, the home that it provides. Savoring that moment is to see it, be in it, and really enjoy it completely. How do you do with savoring the moment? Yeah, when your kid, for those of you who have a kid, brought home that last report card, because it's the end of the semester, right? Report cards are coming in. How many of you guys savor that moment of, oh, we finished the semester, great job on these completions? Or how many of you guys fully enjoyed that moment? Or did we go straight to what needs to be fixed and corrected and what happened and what needs to be done and that list of to-dos? So being in this moment, I've said it a couple of different ways now. I mean, it's always feels like a bait and switch, right? No matter what topic, I'm like, first mindfulness, first be in this moment, first learn how to love being in this moment and completely enjoy that moment, because that's the only moment we have. It's the only moment we have. Sometimes we go, but we're trying to set ourselves up for the next moment. We're never promised that. There's some of us who the next moment will never come because this was their last moment right now. We know this because humans like are born and die. That's just our condition. So right now in this moment, can you look around your space right now and take in something that you really love visually? Or do you have a smell in your space right now that you can enjoy completely? Is the temperature so perfect, but you didn't even recognize it right now? So savor something in this moment right now. And if you wouldn't mind throwing it in the chat after you fully felt it and enjoyed it, it would be lovely for you guys to share with one another what you're savoring in this moment. Enjoying completely. So your ability to go here, your willingness to savor the moment, your willingness that directly contributes to where you are on that happiness scale, your ability to savor the moment. And as we open up these awareness windows, comes responsibility and choice. If we have not been heard, okay, again, if we have not been heard in all the things that happen to us, it will feel like more of a struggle to go take responsibility for my actions. What do you mean? My parents didn't do it. My grandparents did it. My boss doesn't do it. So it becomes hard to take responsibility over our own choices when we haven't been heard. So if you're feeling disconnected to this segment, please know that there's probably some hurting that needs to be happening and some grieving that needs to be happening. Yeah. But once we get through those moments, however long it takes, then we can go, as these spaces open up, these awareness windows open up, then we have some responsibility. And we have to make some choices and be aware that we're making choices. True happiness consists not in the multitude of friends, but in the worth and choice. I'm going to take a quick little moment and see what you guys put into the chats here. The cool breeze on my skin. Savor that, those of you who are feeling breezes right now. Plant clippings that are in the process of growing new life. I have them in a glass jar. Guys, how amazing is that you can be the steward of growing new life? Like, that's worthy of savoring. Savoring the wind blowing my dark blue pareo that covers the window with the sun shining through. Being in office with my personal things that bring color to my day. Yeah. When's the last time you savored those? Are you doing it just because I asked you to do that? And is it possible for you to just put it in your calendar for tomorrow on winter solstice, what you could maybe savor today or tomorrow? Savor it every day. Awesome. Awesome. So your ability to savor this present moment, whatever your present moment is, directly is linked to happiness and your ability to let go, this thing called forgiveness. So then as these awareness windows open, then we have some responsibility over our choices. And we're always making choices, many, many, many layers of choice. In fact, let me just ask, how many of you guys have ever been to a gym? And do all the people who show up at the gym show up in the same exact way? I mean, we know a couple of things. One, at some point they made a choice to go to that gym, right? But there are some people who are there like almost against their will. There are some people who are super enjoying it. There are some people who have mindlessly checked out. There are some people who are going to complain about that whole time, because there are several components to choice. Sometimes if I asked, why are you so grumpy at the gym? Why are you so grumpy at the gym? You would never say, because I made a choice to come to the gym, but I didn't choose to be happy at the gym. Right? We don't know that there are separate choices. In fact, that there are separate choices and many, many more. So using that same gym analogy, or use whatever analogy that makes sense to you. The question is, again, what's your intention around going to the gym? Is it to punish yourself? Because then I can tell you that, that's the grumpy face that I'm seeing. Or is it because you want to take care of yourself, honor yourself, you love it? Then what do you pay attention to when you're at the gym? Some people pay attention to, oh God, it's so heavy and this is so much work. Other people pay attention to, oh my God, look at what my body can do. Some people pay attention to, look at all these people that are here doing the same thing. Some people pay attention to that hot so-and-so over there in the corner, and that's what I'm paying attention to. What do you, there's endless things that you can pay attention to, right? But know that it's a choice that we're making around what we're paying attention to. It might be unconscious choice, but it's still a choice. Attention, attention. And then what meaning do you give to gyms? What meaning do you have? It's a place for punishment. It's a place for joy. You have given the gym meaning. Maybe it's out of awareness, but nevertheless, it's still a choice around the meaning you have given to the word gym or the word working out. What meaning have you given it? And then what attitude do you hold against it because of the meaning that you gave it? That might be out of our awareness. So if something feels like torture, then I'm going to have an attitude that shows that I think this thing is torture. Yeah, so what attitude do you give yourself permission to hold against that thing that you created your own meaning? And can you swap out that meaning? Can you swap that out? Will that help? Maybe not, but maybe. And then what response do you have around the choice that you're making? around gym. Yeah, so the choices that we're making, it's not, I just chose to go to the gym. You chose to go to the gym. You chose to pay attention to certain things. You chose to give those things certain meaning. You chose to have a certain attitude about it. And then you chose to respond. So just going to the gym has this 5-layer, maybe more, because it's moment by moment by moment. So the question is, how much awareness do you have around that? Because that will matter. So the happiness choice is, what meaning have you given to the word happiness? What meaning have you given to the life? And then like what attitude? All of those layers are within your choice making. All of these layers. It can feel convoluted. It can feel like, wait, where do I even start? You start where it feels good. You start where it feels good. But the forgiveness story has very specific components. So when I'm talking about what do you pay attention to, how long can you keep that attention? Do you even know you're paying attention to that? And can you savor that moment? That's the first piece of the forgiveness story. The forgiveness story looks forward, but it's rooted in this present moment. Whereas our grievance story was all about what was done to us back then, even if the back then was 5 minutes ago. So if you're complaining about your boss and what they said to you 5 minutes ago, it's still the past. So if I'm like, oh, Patricia, did you hear? God, he said X, Y, and Z. That's, you're sitting here looking at the past, communicating that to whoever. Yeah, so the forgiveness story, the component is, are you rooted in this present moment looking forward? And then it's really asking a question about intention. Well, how do you want to feel going forward? Like, that's just a general question. How do you want to feel going forward? That's what your forgiveness story will start with. This is how I want to feel going forward. This is how I want my life to be. This is what I see for myself. And then the foundation is created by your positive intention. I mean, I just talked a lot of smack about positive intentions, right? The road to hell and all that. But the positive intention, I think it's very specific to my trauma. So if my trauma, the story that I point to separated me from a felt sense of safety, then my positive intention might, in my forgiveness story, be around creating some safety for myself. If my grievance story focused around how like my dignity was obliterated, then my forgiveness story might focus around how I can maintain a sense of dignity in my life. And then it's not full or complete enough to just end there. This positive intention in our forgiveness story needs some concreteness. What am I going to do about that? How do I bring about some dignity in my life? Only I, Joey, will know that about Joey. Yeah, so what are the underlying goals that I want to achieve? Yeah, how do I want to be seen? So I want to be very specific around these areas. The forgiveness story lets go of the victimhood present in my grievance story. So it's not my mom's fault that I turned out the way I turned out. Yeah. But it is about me going, okay, there are some things that was not helpful. And so now how do I want to take charge? And then how do I want to show up in my life so that I have a sense of safety and some like a sense of belonging and some dignity? How do I manage myself when I find myself like freaking out again? Because when I feel like I don't belong, it's almost like I go into that storm. It feels like I get sucked out of the eye of the storm and I'm just being whirled around sometimes at 150 miles. Like not belonging feels so lonely and so sad. And so like it tumbles with a bunch of other emotions. So I know that I'll go there. I know that because my life is me, the essence of who I am, but also my trauma, suffering, and my coping mechanisms. So just because I know this isn't going to automatically fix it. So I have to have some plan in place. So when I get swooshed into that storm, what will I do? For me, I go out to the cliffs. That help, like getting out in nature feeling that wave crash against the cliffs. And I can smell that smell and feel the awe of nature and feel like the smallness, like, oh, it's not just all me. That helps me recharge so that then I can go back and achieve the goals that are inherent in my positive intention. So if my goal is to belong, then that means I need to say yes to some friends who invite me to things, even if like my initial reaction is like, oh, I don't want to do that, but I want to belong. Then I might need to say some yeses. I will pick my yeses accordingly, set my boundaries and all that. But belonging means that I'm going to belong to myself and to others, right? I will have to do some things in my life that showcase and practice that. And it's not my mom's fault that I can't do that very well, right? I get to practice some of that. And then I will breathe, I will meditate, I go in my cliff, and then I can say, okay, I will come show up to that thing. How do I remind myself that I'm the main character and I'm not at the mercy of external conditions? I'm not at the mercy of the weather. I'm not at the mercy of you. I'm at the mercy of my friends, my parents, my partnership, my old relationships. I'm the main character. How do I remind myself of that? It's going to be important to think that through. How do I recognize that this is not about toxic positivity, that there are some crappy things that will continue to happen, and there's some beautiful things that are continuing to happen? How do I create enough space that I can see both? It's not personal, but I can't deny my pain. And then I demonstrate that peace comes from what I'm actually doing and not from an imagined sense. If you did that, and if this was this, and if that was that, then I could be. That mind game.
Hi, I was just calling to see, can I order something now or does it have to be ordered in advance?
Hey, Kahala, you're unmuted. Could you mute yourself, please? Thank you. Okay. So think for yourself around those components. What felt like doable? What pieces do we leave out sometimes in our forgiveness story? For me, it's definitely that management piece of when I get sucked in, when I get sucked back in, because our brains like really are simplistic in its complexity. It's very simple in its complexity. But sometimes I go, I teach this stuff. I've been doing this forever. I should know better. I should no longer want to crawl in bed with a bag of chips and a bottle of wine. So I tend to should on myself versus utilizing the tools that I have for the times that feel tough, the times when I feel not so safe, the times that I feel disconnected. So that's the piece that gets left out for me. So I'm going to be attaching this into the chats that you can print out if you wish. Handwriting it is helpful. Making that brain-hand connection is helpful. So whether you print this out and write it here, or you just take the prompts and write it in your own journal might be helpful. So your forgiveness story, ask yourself these things and then write them down. What is your overall intention around letting go and living your life on purpose? How will that support your ability to be happy? So take a little time and really investigate for yourself. Give yourself that time and attention. And then your specific positive intention. So not this general one or one thing that you should have as a positive intention. So as a helper, I think a lot of times people should you into helping more or helping all the time or helping everyone. That won't be good enough. This is about your positive intention that helps you let go of that grievance story. So if you can tie it to your grievance story, it's super helpful. And then what specific things can you do to make that positive intention come to life? So if you want more love, what does love look like for you? I want more love. That means I have to take care of myself. So physically, there are some components that I wasn't doing that I do much better now, that show myself that I love myself. When I was mistreating my body, mistreating my mental health, escaping all the time, because I'm a time traveler. I will escape my body. And there are some times in my life, I don't even remember being in my body. I remember watching my body do the thing. So what kinds of things, what to do can I do to come back into my body so that I can make that positive intention come to life? So hold yourself to task and really get these down. And if it doesn't feel good, then put this work down. Yeah, and take care of yourself. How do you let go of victimhood and take emotional responsibility? How do you do that? How will you do that? What are you currently practicing? What's serving you? What could you practice? How do you remind yourself that you are the main character? That's it. You are the center of your universe. And that sometimes has a selfish thing, right? But that is just as true for you as your child, as your partner, everybody. If you imagine yourself, yeah, in an empty room where you can see all of the horizons. That's not a room, right? That's the world. You can see horizon 360 degree. And then you run forward. You're still at the center of that. Run back. You're still at the center of that. That is true for everybody else. You are the main character. You are the main character. From that position, I wonder how you could serve as a helper with more happiness, with more joy, and with more peace, if you saw yourself as that main character. How do you remind yourself that it's not personal? It's just not. And it's personal, both and. How do you remind yourself that so that you can constantly keep yourself somewhere in that middle space? And then what do you do? How do you practice being present? How do you practice being present? I'm dropping both that forgiveness worksheet, and at the beginning of it will be the components to writing your grievance story. Because if we start here, just writing your forgiveness story, it might be helpful if you're really familiar with this language. But if this is your first time go at it, please know that your stories deserve to be heard, and not just once. Heard in a way that gives you a felt sense of being heard. There's a difference there. And if you've been talking to the same people and they kind of roll their eyes, then you're talking to the wrong person. We want to find places where you feel safe, that you can feel seen. Sometimes that is with loved ones, but sometimes it's with your boss. Sometimes it's with a paid therapist. Sometimes it's with a group. When we're feeling tight and constrained, it's sometimes hard to see those options and to feel creative in the way that we can take care of ourselves. So it might start off with writing this story, but it might start off with just 30 seconds of breathing and you just being with yourself, willing to be compassionate with yourself. And then when you notice any judgmental thoughts coming up, letting yourself know that that's okay. That's part of us being human. And how quickly can you let that go and savor what might be going right around you? Kantaro, I love the idea that as you're working, you can just quickly take a look at little plants and go, ooh, the roots are growing. Yeah, and savor that moment. Or for me to look out into the trees or drive myself 40 minutes to the cliffs that I like, because I'm worth that 40-minute investment of a drive and gas. What will it be for you? And then be specific, because this general keeping it in your mind, we just become information hoarders that will not do us any good. The magic is in the practicing, asking yourself, what do I think? How do I feel? What am I doing or not doing? And is it in alignment? Get support around that. So did everybody get access to that chat? It looked like it went. So everybody got that PDF. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So please feel free to alter it, change it. If a question doesn't feel right for you, this is your life. You can alter and change any of that. All of this is free source. And there's a lot of other resources. I encourage you to reach out to one another, continue to show up here. Tomorrow, we're going to be deep diving a little bit deeper into attitudinal healing and choice around our lunch and learn. So I invite you to come back to that. We also have peer support stuff going on, and this is all funded by most of your agencies. So this was done for you by the people who run these departments, because it's really important. Your mental health, your wellness, your ability to connect to yourself, it's really important. Yeah, not only for world peace, but just for your own personal peace. It's a good thing that both of those things are tied. We individually can live with peace. That is how we create peace on earth. I know I ended with a, like, hey, all hokey pokey, but it's holiday season. I get nostalgic. I get nostalgic. So please lean into the thing that serves you well and that feeds you. And then you let go of whatever doesn't serve you well. Thank you for being here. If you need the link for tomorrow, you can stay on for a moment. Otherwise, have a Merry Christmas if you celebrate. Happy Kwanzaa if you celebrate. Just regular old winter solstice if that's what you celebrate. And in either case, the next time I see you, it will be 2022. And I look forward to that. Thank you so much for this hour. Thanks, everyone. And if you want to
Joey,
stay on,
thank you.
thank you.